Alright, let's give this a shot. I think studio mode might be broken in here. It's creating some issues. Let's take the music down just a hair. There you go, right about there. I'm having some hijinks with my display capture here. You get to see my whole process. Let's see. I wish there's some better method of getting this to snap. It's being hinky. It doesn't like my super ultra wide monitor, which is why it's being like this. Ugh. Stretch the screen, center to screen. Let's try that. Fit to screen. Let's try center to screen really quick. Just trying to like scale it so I only have part of it, but it's also hard because it won't let me get farther out from the source. But okay, it's fine. I'm just gonna switch to my second display anyway. Hey folks, yeah, sorry about that. Running a little late this morning. A lot of hijinks. Hopefully everyone hears me. I'm coming through. There were a couple issues with the internet, and then I booted up, and of course Windows is like, hey, we just did a major update and we changed a bunch of stuff, and now, okay, all your stuff is broken. I gotta switch to Linux, man. The problem is Linux is hard to run with ZBrush, sadly. But I'm trying to do this so that I can have like my main giant display. Here, let me show you this for a second, because this thing is crazy. This display is so ridiculously huge. So this is what we're rocking with here, which is just like, look at the size of that thing. That's way too big. Let's put my camera back here. And then, you know, I've got all the other stuff, and sometimes it just doesn't want to hit work it for me, but I think I got it. And sadly, I still have this awful lag, which I definitely blame on Windows Ink, because you can see if I wait a second before I draw, it's completely smooth, but if I just start drawing, it always gives me like a little jittery line, and it's Windows' fault. God, I hate it. They keep throwing this Windows Ink into everything, and that's the thing that's breaking everything, so it's like I have to keep turning it off. Again, I have to switch to Linux. I'm so sick of Windows that keep breaking everything. And I can't switch to Mac because, well, you can't do game development on a Mac, so at least not the stuff I do. Let's get into it. Enough whining from me. I want to go through and give everyone my thoughts on their stuff. And let's see. I want to check, make sure I've got the right days for everything. So I'll just work backwards and I'll make sure I hit everybody up as I go. So, lower than we recommend. It's because the internet here is such garbage, everybody. If our internet here was better, I wouldn't keep getting these messages saying that it's too low. Let's go. First up, Meredith. I could really use more of a screenshot-y kind of view with everything like that. And again, it's like that kind of thing about like, how are you gonna make me pop in and out of every single individual window, especially when my internet's being so slow this morning. Like, give it to me all laid out in one thing. Just because I'm asking for topology doesn't mean the rules change. I want to see it on one image, otherwise it's way longer and way slower. And look at this. Meredith, I don't need everything outside of this. That's so much space. Now I gotta what, download it, zoom in on it? Like, how am I gonna give you feedback on this? We are in what, week 13? This class is almost over. Like, everybody, like, you know that I want to see these images in ways that it makes it easier for me to actually like present it. How am I gonna give you feedback on your head sculpture? I'm gonna give you feedback at all this fucking Windows Ink shit. But like, how am I gonna give you feedback on this head, Meredith? How? Like, I can't see anything. Like, it's such a tiny image. as well as like the side views and things like that. I'll tell you right off the bat, obviously we got way too many spans here, way too few spans here. These aren't super evenly distributed. The arms look okay. I think there's the head has got some stuff, but it's a little, again, it's hard to see because I'm so far from it. But I suspect you don't have a loop around the mouth, which is going to be a big problem. I swear, every week trying to do this thing as a stream has been some technical nightmare after another. I think it's because I'm trying to do it from my laptop. I should just do it from home, but I can't make my other classes, so I don't know, maybe I have to just drag an 8-pound desktop with me to work every day. I get these arms in my chair out of the way too. I'm having a real day here. Andrew's having a real tech issue kind of day. It seems like everything's in the wrong spot. Everything's annoying me. Yeah, you can see in here. These don't look super great, like pinched in like that. I can't really see what's happening with that, but it looks like we got loops going around there. Probably don't want a loop going that way. That doesn't make a ton of sense. I just say, like, you know, go through. This is obviously like all a real mess. We want this to be much more evenly, cleanly distributed. This distribution here looks fine. But when I look at it from the side view, I'm like, I don't know what's going on there. So, you know, take out like the relax brush. It's one of the best things you can use for this. Is, you know, relaxing your retapo. I need to relax. I'm gonna move off over here into. Looking pretty good here, Alan. I think you've got a good distribution. I think you can go subdivide a little bit or go higher resolution. I think we need probably more spans along this. Remember, your goal with these is, like, again, depending on your kind of target of what you're trying to go for, but if you're looking at a stylized character, you're anywhere from 10,000 to 60,000 is pretty common. Like, I think like an Overwatch or Valorant character is anywhere from 10K to 60,000. If you're looking at something like Uncharted or God of War, like that really super high end, they go closer like 100,000. So if you're hovering around like 8,000, like bump it up more, give me more resolution. We can get away with a lot more in here. Your face topology though, I'd say it looks pretty good. I like the flow here. We could probably smooth that out. Like this little transition feels pretty severe. So we can probably smooth that out a little bit more. But other than that, I think you've got this. I would say before the horn, we want a loop around it. Generally, we want a supporting loop on either end of some feature. So if we have something like a horn here, and we know there's going to be loops running that way, we also want around the base a loop as well, and then we can, you know, build off into whatever grid kind of shape or pattern we want. Because sort of basically saying, hey, this red line right here is sort of the crux of what we're doing, so we want two supporting edges on either side of it, which will give us the cleanest looking topology. But I'd say you're making good progress here, Alan. Keep it up. Oh, I got more people up here. 10:30, Aiden. 10:29, Rachel. Well, good thing I'm having so many technical issues, and I do appreciate that I got some image submissions to go with this. Aiden, this is pretty decent. I think this is an area that I don't particularly like how this has been resolved here. I think you can probably chase this down into this corner. Like, we could probably get rid of this entire vert and instead have it flow down in the corner of the mouth, which is a much more common direction. What this is giving us is you have a 5-sided star right next to a 3-sided star, and that's going to create some issues if you try to smooth it out any further. It's not the end of the world. I'm just saying something to keep in mind for the future. But I like to see that we've got the eye loop. Let's follow this one along. We got this head loop here. Not really. You're kind of missing one critical loop, and I can see why, because you're splitting it there. We really want this loop to be able to resolve up and over, and it's not. So let's look at resolving that, and then we definitely want a loop. This loop's reached around the nose, but we kind of have this. I guess this is kind of the loop that goes around the mouth. That's nice to have, but we do need that. This loop generally would come up and over it. So I would actually say connecting this into this loop and then having this loop go up over the head, and then you have these in the eye, and then this one, do we got one that goes all the way? Yep. This one kind of comes up and over the head, which is also fine. That's a pretty good one. And then we got some loops around the mouth. I think you're onto a good start. Our distribution of form, I love what you've done with the shoes here. I think the jacket stuff looks pretty good. Although, like I said, this kind of stuff here is pretty messy looking. The other distribution of form look pretty okay, but we could also probably retopologize in a way that helps reinforce some of the folds in the clothing. Other than that, you're on a pretty good track. Just got to get finished. Rachel, let's take a look. All right. Okay, I'm seeing, hard to see how this goes, but it does look like it flows around here. That's nice to see. This one kind of comes up and around. That's logical. I think we could use this loop here, should probably continue around in a circle instead of getting directed down. You want like a little bit more to get correct topology, but again, at this stage it's not super critical. This is a good loop, this is a good loop. I'd say your face loops are pretty good. The body distribution looks pretty good. Keep an eye out, you've got some 5-siders down here. You can just triangulate down at the bottom if you need to. It's usually okay, especially on a piece of geometry like this further down. Sometimes people like to triangulate even like really high up here to help spread things out, because it helps reinforce the idea that clothing folds in on itself. Other than that though, I think your distribution of form looks pretty good. It's just, you gotta finish it. You got a lot more pieces to do. That's the thing. Next thing we're doing, everybody, is we're going straight into our, we're going to be going straight into all of our UV unwrapping and baking starting today. So we got to get these done. Next up is Sam. All right. So, you know, look at the difference in distribution of form on the front and on the back. Like, it's so dense back here and it's much lighter back there. We want to keep this very even. Plus you've got this little seam line that runs straight through. Like, we just cut that. We don't need that. We don't need that many extra edges. Really, we're trying to create like an even distribution of form, and you can see here, like, really, really tightly packed. Well, why is it so tightly packed? Does it need to be? I think we need to be using the relax up there. Head is a little small to see. It looks okay, but definitely finish up the ears and the arms. You can probably build out with this jacket, could be the same part as these pants. I don't see any reason they couldn't. Actually, most of this body could all be one solid piece and you could get away with it, because none of this is really draping. Like, I see that you've done that with the boot, which I think is the right call. It's going to make texturing and other elements like this a lot easier. But I think we could continue that up through the rest of the body. Just take a look at some of that form. Ishii, retopo points. This is kind of a mess in here. Like, you can see, like, we're trying to resolve a lot of, like, I see it's not quite a triangle, but you kind of got a kite next to a kite. What you also got here that we got to look out for is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is usually too many, and it's especially too many in a point like this. So you gotta want to avoid that. Generally, if you can just get 5, you want that. And I see a lot of other points here where it's like connected in and then we have that. We can often just, like, a lot of these edges probably aren't necessary, and we could resolve it in more of a grid. So instead, connecting it a little bit more down, you could really build this out into more of a grid shape and not need a lot of this extra stuff. Same thing, I noticed you have the same issue Sam does. Not Sam, whoever I was looking at. Where we have a 5-sider, or I think Aiden had something like this. I guess this is 4. It feels like 5. But I think we've got a, oh, it's at least 1 level away, but it's still a little too close for my call. I don't like having a node right there, because for a character that would articulate, this is such a point of the mouth that would move so much. So you kind of want, you want this loop coming around, you got that one. You want this loop going around your mouth. You want this loop. I see we've got a loop that, yeah, more or less goes over the eyes. And where does this loop going? Yeah, this loop's kind of meandering in 2 different directions, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I think it's some of the ways you've connected these shapes that I don't think works super well, especially like in theirs, to me is a real mess. And like, look at all those very tightly packed you kind of got all these tightly packed ones, but then next to a really big face and then a really small set of faces. So try to even these out a little bit more and it will look a lot better. Looking at your coats, we definitely have a lot of span. We need way more spans running this way and this way. And like I said to some of the other folks, don't be afraid to, you know, triangulate a little bit or cut into your form to help reinforce that. We also, though, like I was saying with Alan, with the horn, we want a supporting loop here and a supporting loop here. The secret to almost any like sharp or hard to reinforced edges is actually 3 edges. So anywhere we want an edge to be strong, we need an edge to be on either side of them. And that's why we get this idea of 2 loops on either side of a primary edge, because then I know that no matter how weird it gets everywhere else, you know, with like weird triangulation and stuff, it can get as weird as it wants, but this edge will be protected because it's got this buffer zone of 2 clean quad edges on either side of it. So that's generally ideal. I still think, you know, there should be a little bit more mass here. Maybe we can fix some of this later after we, you know, fix our sculpting. Hands as well need to be retopologized. That's going to take some time. So, you know, don't waste it. We got a lot to do. Kyle, you're just about done. I think, you know, we got a couple extra things. I don't think that's entirely necessary. We probably didn't need that edge, and I think these in general, it's one way to resolve it, because you've got all these extra edges in here. Generally, the way I like to resolve that is running edges across something like a foot. That's how I do something like a hand, but it's not so bad. Overall, though, it looks good. All right. YouTube is a nightmare today. I tried to make my regular stream and it just completely wouldn't do it. Totally messed everything up. And it started its own stream, which is where all that hinky stuff went. All right, let's go back in. Take a look at Nick. So, let's see here. I can't control anything else. And it said it's a public too. Didn't want it to be. Let's see. I'm double checking my background stuff, see if I can do any other settings on this to help me get this to run a little bit more stable. I just have nothing in here. It won't let me do anything without completely canceling the whole thing. There we go. All right, I had to make a change there. All right, we should be okay though. Nick, you're up. Red retopology, blue straight from ZBrush. Yeah, I think some of those things we can just do a reduction. Same kind of deal though that I was mentioning with Meredith. It's just like, man, I gotta click all these images one at a time to even look at it, and it's gonna take, as you can see, every time I want to load one because I'm streaming, it's gonna be so slow. Like, that's just time wasted here. We could probably work with some of this, but you're gonna need to do a lot of polygon reduction. You could try an unsubdivide process, but like this here, we don't need that. This should just be a nice straight line going through. So if you want to do some manual correction, that's great. But unlike a belt, that's completely unnecessary. And you know, we have decent edge flow on these other elements. I'd say that probably should be straight. I think you probably intended that to be. But we just have way too much density on these objects. Remember, we're trying to like relatively even density on objects that are the same. So I think either you can reduce it more or do more likely some manual cleanup. Like we got rid of a couple of these edges and a few spans. We could really reduce that. I'll show a select every other. But like we've been working, like now we're like what, 2 weeks in? And people are like, oh, I'll just work for a third week on a retopology. You can't. You won't have time. We got to do unwrapping, we got to do baking, and we got to do texturing. And if you're still working on retopology for a third week in a row, you're not going to finish this character. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have other finals, you're going to have other projects, and then you're going to come out of the class without a done character, and that's going to really affect if you can't finish the project. As I mentioned before, I'm not looking for perfect when it comes to grading this class. I'm looking for done. And I'm very concerned with the pace at which I see some people taking especially this retopology. But Nick, I think this is, it might be fine in edge flow. Like, some of this is so black I can't see it because of all the wireframes. That definitely tells you it's way too high. Bring the distribution into a more parallel line with everything else, and you're pretty close to being finished. So that's good to see. So we got to get these unwrapped and we got to get them baked. All right, Rachel. We got some weird loops in here. Like, all of this stuff. I don't know where this is coming from, because this is certainly not on any visual guide that I've shown anyone. It's definitely not the way I've shown anyone how to retopologize. This is like, and I don't know what's going on in here either. The inside of the eye's got some weird stuff going on. Really, like, let's see. Do I have the main loops? It's a little hard to see from these images, because the resolution's pretty high. Where's this one go? Nope, that one doesn't go around. This one, you don't really have. So we need the eye mask loop, which we don't have. We don't have that one. I don't have a loop that also goes down and around the nose. I have one here and I have one there. I think, take a look at the topology guide I gave you. There's like so many examples of really good heads in there. Just copy one of them. And again, as I mentioned, other people, you're really, really stuck on that. Like the checkout guy, Danny Mac, 3D. He's got a great YouTube guide that a lot of people just follow for the head retopology if you want the full step-by-step process on it. But I think, this other stuff I see like this, it's like, well, I don't know why that's there. Just if you're struggling with like, oh, I've got not as many edges here as I do there, well then just get rid of 2 of them here and redistribute these. It'll be fine. You don't, like this to me, a lot of these lines look like ZRemesher. Like they don't look like they were done by hand, because this is the kind of stuff ZRemesher likes to do. And if you're using ZRemesher for your clothing retopology, people are going to be able to tell, and they're going to know you didn't do it by hand, because it's not. It's topology that works fine for sculpting, but it's not going to work well for actual modeling and posing and unwrapping. It turns into a real mess. Like all of this stuff just doesn't feel like it's logically laid out. So I'm not sure what's going on, especially again with the ear and stuff like that. I just think it's got to be, retackled. I think you got a lot of work to do on this retopology, because you got a lot of sculpted pieces, and you're saying 7:05 a.m. Yeah, if you're working that much on it, but I don't know. Like, it doesn't look like it was done. If it was done by hand, like that's pretty crazy, because you're got a lot of asymmetry, but it also just feels like, wow, that would have taken forever to do by hand. But it does look a lot like something that was done with an auto tool, which is just, it's not going to fix your problem. So that's something I would definitely look into, and something I would say you're probably gonna need to do you're probably gonna need to start the whole thing all over again, because I don't see any point of salvaging this take on it. Nick, Noah, let's see. Okay, your sculpt stuff looks better. I think especially, Noah, with these like very sharp lines, we want our topology to follow that. So we should probably have supporting loops on either side of that to help follow that topology. Things like the shirt, your distribution there seems okay. You do have a real problem though with your mouth. You did that thing that I kept telling people not to do, where it's one loop into another. It needs to be a contiguous loop around, and it's not. There's a corner there, and there's a corner there, and that's just not good. You don't want it. We need to loop all the way around here. We need to loop all the way under around here. We need to loop around and over the eyes. We need to loop in the eyes. Same thing with the hands. Like, you can't just go straight from there to there. Like, you need, look at the topology examples I gave everyone. You need loops that run across there. Otherwise, it's never going to resolve correctly. The rest of the body looks okay. like a little messy in a couple spots, like too much density in some areas, not enough in others. Give some love to the knees if you want them to bend, because they don't have enough geometry to bend right now. But also you probably don't even need like most of this, like, because that's all going to get covered by the pants. So like all of this we don't really need. The boots, the topology in this is very simple, but it's probably fine. It's usually better to follow a little closer to some of these shapes. I'd just say the shape of the boot is definitely still feels like odd. Like it's too thick. It slants back at a very severe angle. Like a shoe kind of does this, and then it has a back section to it. Because remember, our foot is kind of like this, and we've got a heel, and then it pops out. So a shoe tends to have that shape that fits with it. So what it doesn't do is go up here and then it's a big thick chunk and then it's straight back. That's what it does not do. And because we wouldn't have any room for the heel back here, and I think you got too much room in the toe. It would just be awkward. Your feet would be flopping all over the place in it. So I'd fix some of these loops in the face. Aiden did that one. Liam, if you ever see another square, you're gonna cry. Well, be ready to cry, Liam, because you're gonna have to make a lot more squares. What is it with the thing about people always saying that they're gonna cry? I don't get that. That's the crotchety old millennial in me. I hate it when people say that, because it's just like, I don't know, just do it. It's not that bad. You could be working in a coal mine. Doing 3D character art is way easier than working in a coal mine. We need loops, very strong loops around the eyes, strong loops around the nose. And, this little shape here, we want a nice set of loops on either side of this. Going above and below should be running. Because right now, you can see, like, we don't really have... I guess we have 2 loops running down here. This cross in there, I think, is a little awkward to me. But the biggest thing to me is not really having a strong set of loops. Like this, all this little extra resolution in there, don't know what it's doing for you. I think you packed too much in there. I know it's fun to say, but it's not fun to hear. I don't know, like you said, it's probably just me out of touch. I think it's serious. Someone tells me they're gonna cry, like I've had students cry. Like I think, oh shit, they're actually gonna cry. But like, I know people mean it as like a meme, but I can't hear it as a meme. I'm old now. My ears don't hear that tone anymore. Yeah, well, Will, I got good news for you. They always need more coal miners, so that's what you want to do. We'll all be mining for coal, because AI is not going to take coal jobs. That's mean of me to say. Spencer, I think this version of the head looks a lot better. I think it's a lot cleaner. You still, though, have the mouth corner problem where it's 2 lines. So let's clean this up a little bit, and what we really need is that loop running around, meaning that we have all the faces, all homunculi. Yeah, well, maybe someday, let's hope. Running through there, I see the eye running here. This loop comes up and around. This loop comes under here. Those are good. I think this face, again, looks a lot better than the last one, but we still got to get that loop around the mouth, and we don't, because we have a corner there. So that's the thing we're looking out for. I saw the same thing with Noah's, where it's sort of like this shape, and you have a loop of edges running this way, and then you have a loop of edges running this way. And the reason that's such a problem is these corners will always pinch. So instead, what you need to have is something more like this. I'm gonna make it a little clearer. So that it loops all the way through that. But I like the hair too. This is done like auto. This is probably fine to do auto, but it's, I think, too high resolution. But even then, like with the amount of detail that we're gonna bake into it, it's probably actually okay if this is just a flat piece of geometry, with like a big plane. I'm doing like a geostar, I'm just drawing it terribly. But I'm gonna just keep blaming Windows for that. Where we just take some kind of disked shape in here, and it would totally work fine. I would do like a division along here and a division along here just to give it a little recess, just to pop it in, and that would be more than enough. So just trying to make sure your distribution of form is relatively even. I also am not a huge fan of like this. I would integrate, if it's going to be this close, integrate the foot into it. Like, don't make these separate pieces. There's no reason to. We can really make this all part of the same topology. I don't see a reason to separate these. We can separate the boots out, but let's make it all one contiguous airtight version, watertight version of the same thing. Kenzie, got some resubmission stuff. Let's take a look at the head. Head's always the most important thing. So this form, it kind of runs down, that goes up, check. This one goes around the eye, check. I just think we need maybe another span through here, and especially you've got this one in here, great, but I'd actually do like take this edge and do a bevel to it so it turns it into two edges, and then you can spread it out and soften it a little bit. Other than that, you've actually got the main base shapes in. We just need to do some relaxing up in some of these corners up here to help our head, to help evenly distribute some of these verts. But you got the right idea. For the legs, I think you got definitely an issue. It's maybe in your sculpt, it's maybe in your verts, but you've kind of got that pinching, and we really don't want that in the groin. It makes it really hard to control. See if you can flatten that out if at all possible, so that we have a nice little gap in between. And then we want those edges to go into the corners, which you got, so that's a good stage. This is definitely like a little bit awkward with that star there. So what you have here is like that knee, and I like that, but we don't need that star, because we don't need this extra edge loop running through there, so we could reduce that. Just take this and just shoot it straight down would even be fine, edgewise. Yeah, we got some more pieces to do on it. See, you're working too with this little belt. I think, you know, that's the problem sometimes with working with the Zero Mesher stuff, is it doesn't always work super great for what you want to do, because what we really want on a hard surface object is pretty hard edges on things, and then pretty simple edges there. That's why most people choose to just do them by hand, even if they have a Z-remeshed version, because, you know, unless you've really cleaned it up, it's easier that way. Will, got some pieces. Need a lot more spans running through these arms. They're very important. We need a lot more in there. This is actually a pretty good job of, I think, retopoing this. I think the shoulder pieces probably should be done by hand. But the big thing is your face. Really tight here. Really tight here. Not enough spans there. It's all going to be very even, ideally, when we're done with it. So I think you just got too many edges. And then everything is kind of poking in here. You've got a one vert in the middle that's looks like 12 edges connected to it. It's a huge no-no. That's, especially if you try to subdivide it, it will absolutely pinch in the middle, because it's called a high variance vert. So as well as we don't want a star right on the center of the nose. Those little stars, the little 5-pointers and 3-pointers, we call them stars because it's just different than like a regular 4-point intersection, which is what most things are. We try to hide them in places that aren't going to move a lot, you know, around corners and stuff. But putting it right in the center, is going to be a big problem for your topology. It'd be super obvious. So we really want to avoid that. The shoulder pieces were done by hand. Oh, you overthought it. Like, go way bigger, go way simpler. Like, this can just literally be that and that. Like, it doesn't need this many sides, especially like seeing how many sides some of these other things have. Try, like you said, when everyone started out, like, you're trying to make your retopology as simple as possible when you start, and then you can always add complexity to it to add more features. But really, like, with the head retopology, with all of it, I'm always starting with, like, what's the fewest number of faces I can use to actually resolve this shape to get this idea. And I think we just got a lot of extra detail packed into it, a couple extra corners. So I think, you know, that's why I always recommend starting with a couple of big loops that you need, and then connecting them one at a time, but just enough as much as you need. To me, that would be the ultimate retopology tool. auto retopology tool is just like, let me make the loops. Let me make the initial loops that I want. And then you fill in the gaps, because the loops are what's really important. I don't know, maybe someday there'll be a tool that does that. But not today. We have to still do it by hand, because the machines aren't good enough at it yet. But let's, yeah. Add some more spans there. And I'm not sure if you're trying to like connect this all into one piece, but if we are, let's go ahead and just do it. Like, what's stopping us? That was Sam's. Anthony, you're working on some hair stuff here. I'd give the same note just that I gave someone else. Make sure we have at least 2 edges to help that. But the transition here looks pretty good. Let's just build it out and continue it straight down. You know, running across, and I would even say we could probably attach this whole thing as one. You know, same thing with the collar. Head's form feels a little lumpy up here. I'm sure it's going to be covered by cloth later. Can't get close enough to really get a good look at the head topology, but it looks like we kind of got like a weird groove, almost like the center of his forehead's popped out. All right. Ishi, I talked about yours. Lula, hair's looking good. Don't really have any retopology to talk about. I think like she's still like a little, but I mean, she's Bratz doll, so I guess they're supposed to be like that. But I'd love to see some of the retopo. But I think we're making good progress like this. I think just taking some more of your hair strands and duplicating it. We can even do, what I kind of like to do is like do a couple small hair strands, and then you could do a big chunk like this as geometry using the zero mesher technique I showed. And zero mesher, when it comes to like the big blocky hair, is usually fine. We don't care that much. David. Yep, I think it's coming along. I think we probably have too many spans running this way, and we don't need like that extra resolution. You just got a lot of resolution in there. Try to maintain the same sort of resolution that we see in the sleeves. So I think we maybe have too much running through that collar, and we can tone it down. I'm excited to see this done though, because like other sculpting all looks really nice. Boots look pretty good, although I can see you got some issues there. Sometimes what helps is if you're really having that jumping off, go check your offset on your node. So go take your shrink wrap node and make sure you have limit. You can set the limit up a little bit to keep anything from jumping too far like that. Kenzie I talked about, Rachel I talked about, Spencer. You got all these pieces in here, that's great. Aiden's retopo foot, Meredith's. That's all from last week. Okay. What do people need to know about? We got a little time here to like work through the rest of the stream. I definitely want to talk more about some relaxed stuff, but what I really want to talk to you about today is, so I recorded a whole video yesterday taking through the entire process of unwrapping, packing, and baking, and it was like an hour and 15 minutes, and as soon as I finished it, I was like, I'm gonna have to redo this. I just don't think it's good enough. I don't think it's clear enough. I think I could do a better job explaining it. So as soon as I'm done here, I'm gonna re-record another one. But in the meantime, I might as well boot it up here and walk you through a couple of my top tips for unwrapping, as well as helping everyone understand the core things that you need to think about with an unwrap. So let me open up, not this one, I'll open up the one we're going to be doing the demo on, which I have right in here. Week 13. Let's do this. Blaine Bungart. It's one of the characters on my profile. I just wanted to do a rabbit guy. I thought it would be fun. So here's an example of a character with individual pieces. I did this because I wanted to be able to have like swappable clothing for this character, so the hat is a separate object. But in the video I talked through a few things, optimizing a couple stuff, and I want to show you some of the things that you need to think about when actually unwrapping a character like this. So in here, and I also have some hard surface stuff to show you too, because I know some people have it. So here's the basic rules for unwrapping. When it comes to a character, our main rule for unwrapping is hiding the seams. And we just want to hide the seams anywhere that they are hardest to see. So for example, something like this object, this tie, I've actually made my life pretty easy to unwrap that. Yeah, this is Thug's Bunny. I love that. That's a good name for him, Thug's Bunny. Let's take this. I'm going to turn off my face orientation, and let's give him a nice material. And I'm going to make, for this tie here, I'm going to make a new material, and it's going to be like a UV material. UV wrap this because I want a nice checker. So I'm gonna hit this little yellow icon, and I'm gonna get rid of Epic Pen. I think Epic Pen is one of the things that's slowing down my system. I need a new pen tool. I don't like it anymore. Hit the yellow one. Let's go to image texture, and we're gonna make a new image texture. This is gonna be UV text for like UV texture. 1024 by 1024 is fine. But if I also know that I'm gonna have a higher resolution, like 2048 even, I might set it to that. But the big thing is setting it to UV grid. There's also the color grid, but I like the UV grid because I'm old and I like that it's simpler. And I'm gonna make a new image, and it's gonna go in fully gray because I don't have any UVs. In fact, if you check this little box, you can see under UV maps, there's nothing. Because I went in and I deleted all the UVs on this so that everyone had to start from scratch. Except for on the demo, the tail, which I missed. So still a UV map there. I'm gonna select everything else and then select this last. So you can see in my setup, I've made it green for my active selection. And then Control L says link materials, and it gives them all the same material all in one pass. I have it in a folder. This is how I like to organize things, which is my low version of my character, and then my high poly version of my character with all its pieces are in here. So in my low, I can now take this object, in edit mode, hit A, and just hit unwrap. And this is actually going to work fine because, as you can see, if we turn on face orientation, there is no backside to this. So it can actually unwrap flat. And it's totally fine like this. And a lot of objects, the other part of the tie is the same thing. I can just unwrap it because, again, it has no backside. My general process for unwrapping stuff like this is to just take items at a time, and I unwrap them, and as soon as I have them unwrapped, I hide them. So I use the question mark on my keyboard to go into local mode, which you can see right there. And then I just pop in, I just do an unwrap on the whole thing, and you can see it does its best, but it's not good, it's kind of a mess. So how do I unwrap something like this jacket? Well, right now I have this coat set to solid mode, which is convenient for me because it means that I only have to unwrap like part of it. I don't have to worry about everything else, and as long as it lines up, it should bake okay. That's good. Got to get hype, but you can't get good texturing without a good bake, and that also requires good UVs. So let's pop out for a second into a little bit of theory. I'm going to make a new scene. I'm going to call this theory. So the way most objects are unwrapped is there's basically two objects, if we can think about it. A cylinder and a sphere. And while we're at it, let's make a UV sphere so you can see this too. Now, how do these objects get unwrapped? Let's take and put this material on them, and we'll show you the default unwrap on all of them. Now, these are the default unwraps, and personally, I'm not a fan of this unwrap. Why am I not a fan of this unwrap? Well, it's actually not a very efficient distribution of shapes. Because we have this issue of we're trying to keep it in as many pieces as possible, but truly, when we're working with like this square, this rectangle cube, it's a hard object. Anywhere that you see an edge that's 90 degrees, I would say even an edge that's like as sharp as 60 degrees, you want an edge there. And since this is all sharp edges, I'm going to go Control E, and I'm going to mark seam. Now you notice I also have a hotkey for this. If you right click on any of this, we can change the shortcut, and I like to use Shift M to mark seam. And then when I unwrap it, you see how much bigger the squares have gotten? So you can see the change of like how many pixels I have. By unwrapping them by themselves, I've gotten a lot more pixels on my object, which means I'm going to use the same size of texture space, but I'm going to get a lot more surface. We call this texel density. The bigger something is, let's pick a face I can actually see. So the bigger something is, the more pixels it will have. Now this is bad because we have an inconsistent texel density, which means if we actually put like a material on this, we would have a very uneven distribution of pixels on the surface. So this is why on the surface, we want our texel density to be as average as possible, which is why if you do average island scale and then pack islands, it's going to try to pack it in as close together. Wow, their new packing algorithm is slow, but it's probably because it's better. takes a while still. So we have an even number, but it's using as much of the space as possible while also not stretching. Because technically, yeah, we could use more of the space if we stretch these out, but then we have uneven pixels. So now some pixels are twice as wide in one direction as another, which again throws off our UVs. So we want them to be square, we want to be even. Let's take look at something like this. Now, this is the default unwrap, because if I unwrap it like just without, let's take all of this, and I'm going to say, and let's go Control E, and we're going to do clear any seams. Oh, it won't even let me unwrap it as badly as I want to. That's pretty funny. Unwrap failed. Oh, because edge seams need to be added. It won't even let me do it because it would be such a bad unwrap, so it's not even doing it. The default unwrap looks something like this. So the cylinder is one of the other major things you're going to try to unwrap. And a cylinder is the idea of, you see in one direction, we have this sharp 90-degree angle, which, as I've told you already, we should make an edge. So let's mark a seam here. And then if I unwrap it, look what happens to the edges. It's a real mess. Now, what do I actually do here? Well, think about any kind of cylinder. Like a sleeve is a cylinder. It's a cylinder of shape, but what they have is a seam right at the bottom, in a place I'm least likely to notice it. So let's just put a seam maybe right in the back here. And then if you see now, if I unwrap it, we get a nice even distribution of shapes on the top and the bottom. And now we can texture this really easy. In fact, let's, if you want to try it out, we try going in here into like texture paint mode. By having a good even distribution here, let's make a new single image. Radius strength. You can see that it doesn't change shape dramatically, and it's able to bridge across this and have an even distribution of form. That's kind of what we're looking for here. Now look at sphere. Now this is the default way they unwrap a sphere. And you notice that if I take all of this and I go to UV and I do seams from islands, it'll show you what these seams actually look like. And check that out. All of the seams are packed into this little area that they've made all these even. But look at how uneven the distribution of these UVs are. I don't like this for things, but there is a very specific use case. In fact, the reason that these are done this way, it has to do with sphere topology theory. But basically, NASA moon texture, you can go get this all free from NASA and they'll give you something like this, right? Let me download this image. Oh, that's massive. Who needs that? That's fine. So if I take this image and I, without changing anything on the sphere, let's like duplicate it and I'll make this one a moon. Put a new material on there, basic color, image, open image from my downloads. And check it out, it's the moon. This is a way that the poles don't get as much data when you collect them from like the kind of way they sample this stuff anyway. So it's fine for this kind of thing. But most of the time when I'm actually trying to work with like a sphere, especially in this shape, what I actually do, Control E, clear seam, is something just as simple as bisecting the shape. And now, when I unwrap it, it instead unwraps the top and bottom pole, which you can see isn't perfect, and it has a seam along the middle, which we usually try to avoid, but look at how much more even the distribution of this form is. And if I really want to push it, I can take something like this center, and by hitting O on my keyboard up here for proportional editing and scaling it, I can roll my mouse wheel and decide how much I want to like kind of bend this. And we can see I've created a very even distribution of form that's much easier to texture on top of. But you're always going to get a little skewing, especially when it comes to regular shapes, especially when it comes to non-hard surface stuff. So when I'm trying to unwrap something like this jacket here, I start by asking, where can I put seams to cut this thing? And let's turn this off in edit mode. So I'm going to just get rid of some of these other edges that I don't need. Let's do clear sharp and clear bevel. 0. Just to take these other little guys off there. Well, no bevel weight, no edge bevel, no vertice. Take all this off. All this off. Okay. Now I have it nice and even. So what I can do now is say cut this sleeve out. We'll work on one side at a time. So I'm just Option and Shift clicking to go around. I'll show you a fast way of doing that in a second. And then I Shift M, and now I'm going to A and unwrap it. And we can see just by separating this out, it's helping this coat a lot. It's still not perfect. We still have a lot of stuff to fix on here, but it's better, that's for sure. So what else can we do? Well, one of the other things that I'm going to do here to make this work is speed some things up. I can go to Options, and live unwrap means as I keep going, it'll unwrap it. So if I cut this seam, because remember, just like on clothing, I have a seam running down the side and a seam running up my arm. If I Shift M, now it's automatically slicing that in half. So it's cutting the seam, and it's cutting in a place I can't see it, and it makes sense with the clothing. So it's making the unwrap. You can see how much more even the distribution of these shapes starts to get. Let's keep going. Now here's, so now that I have this set to automatic like this, I can just take a series of edges and just M, series of edges M, and every time I'm doing it, it's cutting and readjusting my seams. And so, heck, I couldn't. But let's say I got an area, like I got to cut the top here, and I don't want to do the whole thing. I could just go one at a time like I've been doing, but I don't want to do that. Instead, I select this one and control click it, and you can see that gives me select. Now I could hit M to do that, but what's even faster is if you go to this pick shortest path window, you can change it to tag seam. So now I have a little tool that wherever I want, I can just click and it's going to make a seam along it automatically. And that's going to really speed things up. Now, I've done it on one side. Now I got to do it for the other side. Well, I want to do that. So I'm going to choose just one of these seams that I already have. I'm going to Shift G, and we're going to select all of the seams here. Now, with X symmetry turned on, and in Options turning on topology mirror, I need both of those on. If I go to select mirror, it's going to select exactly what I have here, and then all I have to do is Control M, and like already, it's unwrapped the whole thing for me. And check it out. This is the example of, let's move those side by side. I'm going to get rid of my seams and re-unwrap that, and you can see the difference that those seams make. And look at how much more even this is. So that's going to work great with cloth. So this is how I would do something like clothing or a body. Let's take a look and take that body example. One of the toughest things is something like a head. So I'm going to take this rabbit head by itself. Let's go Shift H, so I'm only looking at the head here. And this is an area where, like, okay, heads are pretty tricky. How do I unwrap that? Because if I take the whole thing and I unwrap it, it gives me this. And that's not great. So I have these really long ears, and in this case, I do need to separate these ears from everything else. And I could probably separate it along this edge. I could do the outer edge too, but I want to get a smaller one. Okay, that's improved things a little bit. Let's take this thing, and we're going to go around the ear here to sort of split it in half. And I'm going to do that example I showed you with the sphere, where I'm just going to do a front and back half. And you can see how much better now the distribution is going to work. How about the rest of this? Well, on this character, I've got this big jaw and this big neck. And so sometimes I keep it all together, but they're always going to be fighting with each other. So instead, I'm going to choose these edges and split it. And then to get this to unwrap, I'm just going to go down the middle. So see, that's now the neck. And you can see, again, there's a seam in the back, but he's got that big collar. I'm never going to see it. And now the even distribution is much better. How about this head, though? The head is still a real problem for me. Well, here's how I'm going to do the head. This is the way you do heads, is you take a seam running along the back, and you don't go all the way down, but you go about halfway down, somewhere down the forehead. Usually it's covered by the hair. Usually you can't see it, maybe a hair, maybe a hat. But in this case, do you see how immediately it changed how much more even these squares were? It unwraps it like that. And let's just clean up the rest of the head by doing my seam, and then Control Shift M, and then Shift M. And you can see, like, that's why I like that trick so much, is like, wow, that really speeds up in just a few clicks. I've got an unwrap. With the right hotkeys and a good workflow, unwrapping in Blender can actually be very, very fast. And that's what I like. So now I've got this, and now I have to do a little work though, because things aren't lined up exactly the way I want them to be. I'm going to go into this left view, which is my UV window, and I want this to be upright. Now, most of the time, I don't really care which way they're oriented, but with the face, I might want to go into my UV view and like fix things. So having this rotated in -90 so that I can work with it is actually pretty important. And I'm going to move all these off because I'm now getting into packing, and I want to pack this head with, say, things like hands and things by itself. So by default, it wants to fit in this space, but look at this problem I got. I got more resolution, tinier squares back here than I have in the front, and the front is way more important. So how do I fix that? Well, the biggest thing we can do is just go somewhere in the middle where it's really dense, like I showed you with the eyes, and proportional editing on, and I'm just going to scale up and rotate my mouse wheel until I get more, you know, distribution. So you can see it's creating like a pinching, but that's okay. And now I'm all right with it stretching back here. And in fact, what I can do if I want to pack more in is use this tool right here. This is the grab tool. And this would let me just sort of straighten and nudge things around. And I like to push this into a more rectangular or square shape, because truly what happens back here is not nearly as important to me. And that there is an actual UV Relax tool as well. It's this one right here. And UV Relax can actually help me redistribute back here some of these without stretching this too much. Sometimes it's just a matter of, like, there's Shift, which helps you smooth, and then there's Pinch, which can pull stuff together, or you can hold Control to, like, bulge it out, which might be helpful, but you can see I'm getting, like, some real waviness there, so that's what you got to look out for. But you've got to be very, very careful about how strong you apply these effects, because it can really throw your thing off. But you can now see, like, that's a much better unwrap for something like this head. Let's look at some other objects, like hard surface objects. So something like this belt right here. How am I going to unwrap that? Pretty simple. It's pretty easy to take this front and back like this, and then get the front and get the inside like this, and then just unwrap it, and it's fine. And it's small enough that I'm not going to really notice, so kind of who cares. Other things, like say this belt here, by default, when I unwrap it, it's already kind of got a singular shape. By default, it wants to like be one long single line. But I'm actually going to make an edge back here, because remember that example of, like, look at how much bigger it was able to be, this grids. As soon as I add this, now it can fit into this one-to-one square a lot better, because I've cut it in half so I can pack it in. So it's kind of what we're doing, is we're making cuts where we absolutely have to, and then those cuts can often help us make things fit in better. And in fact, I'm going to go further with this one and make a cut right under these belt loops, because, well, who's going to notice if there's a seam there? And look at how much more space it has. One of the tools that I'm going to give to you in the asset pack is this UV toolkit, which I use all the time. UV toolkit is great because what you can do with this is take something like this object and come down to straighten. And you can see each of these. This one doesn't work super well because it doesn't like working with something like that. Sometimes I just do the straighten anyway, and then I try to manually fix some of these individual verts. It's a little messy at first, but he gets the idea after a second. And now I have a much better pack, but something that's going to fit in more. Because eventually when I'm done with all of this, I'm going to have to pack it in. Look at my pack island settings. Concave, convex, rotate, scale, that's all fine. Oh, I don't want to rotate like that. I also, that's a note, as I don't, in my pack islands, I don't want to rotate any. I want to rotate cardinal, because I only want it to be able to rotate 90-degree angles. It's really annoying when you have like cross stuff. If you have a long skinny thing going across diagonally your whole UV map, cut it in half. Just cut it in half so you can lay it flat. Otherwise, there's no point. But now I can get a much better distribution there. So something like this, I got these little pieces in here. I'm still leaving a lot of stuff like solidify on, because truly for me, what's going to happen is I'm going to lose geometry on the edges, and I can set things like this to only rim in my solidify, because then I can keep them thin and it will only give me, let's see here, it doesn't give me the inside of these, which I don't need. And the edges will just kind of get the same UVs, and it's usually fine. So I can unwrap all of these and then straighten all of these, and then I'm good to go. And now I can combine all these elements together to make, hey, these are all now going to be part of the jacket. So let's take all of these together, and with all of these selected at once, now I can select all of them. I can say UV, average island scale. You can see now that I've done that, let's turn off my visibility. It's now created an even texel density for all of them. And now when I go into UV, pack island, and I pack them, it's going to put them all in one pack together, giving them all even distribution as much as possible. But I can do even better than that. So you see this here, I've got on my jacket here, kind of two little sleeves. Let's turn this back on. Like, I could do a lot better if I made the left sleeve and the right sleeve overlap with each other and just mirror them. I don't want to mirror the whole thing, because if I had a mirrored UV along the center, it might be too obvious. But I could probably mirror the left and right side of the jacket. You know, there's a lot of stuff I could. Like, I probably wouldn't mirror the collar, because maybe I want a little dirt here that's not on there. Gives a little detail. But if I make these sleeves the same, and I make maybe the front and side of the jacket the same, I might be able to save a lot of space and get a lot more efficient a pack. This is like a little bit more advanced of a technique, but it's often nice to be able to use. And so if I go into here and here, I can take something like this, and we can do stack similar islands. But I think first, let's take this. I'm gonna go to linked mode. Linked mode lets me choose faces, and I can L to select this. Okay, good. Now I know that's this face. I'm gonna say SX-1, which flips it in the opposite direction. Why am I doing that? Let's turn off this again. A to select everything. Now I should be able to stack these together. No, you're not gonna stack these islands? Come on. All right, let's try my best to like line them up with each other. Come on, they gotta know that that's the same thing. I wonder if there's anything stacking in here. This is one of the elements where you have to rely a lot on plugins here, because they have not updated it the way they should. Ooh, you know, there's another way I can do this that maybe will make this just a hair easier. Let's go here, and I could just, you know, do what I'm doing here. Manually line things up, make sure they're exactly on. Let's see. Will my pack respect? We're gonna do a pinning here. We're gonna do UVI, cancel. I'm gonna do average island scale. And let's just scale this up a little bit. Just see if this works. Just give it a little space. Moving these out of the way, and I'm going to pick a spot for the two sleeves to go. And I'm going to put them right in here. And we're going to go to pin, which is going to pin all these. Now if I go UV pack islands and I say locked pin islands, it should try to pack everything else around them. Yeah. And there we go. This is a much better pack, and it's going to be the same on the left and right. I can do the same thing with this jacket, but it's going to save me just a little space, and it's going to give me much better texel density. Okay, so let's take a look really quick. You know, again, if anyone's got questions about the stuff, throw at me, because I know I've got 17 concurrent viewers, so someone's got questions about this. Let's take a look at an example of like a hard surface prop. So here is I got the high resolution and the low resolution sitting right on top of each other. And when we're getting ready to do the bake, making sure they're on top of each other is absolutely essential. But I am going to go and select these objects and move them off for a second, just so you can compare and contrast the differences between these two. So you can see the very dense and very loose wireframe. This one has all these extra edges in here because that's going to help come through with all these extra edges in the bake. Whereas this one, you know, extra edges, this is as simple and triangulated as possible. So I'm going to undo that, make sure that you can see they occupy almost the exact same space. Let's turn off high and look at low. How do I unwrap some of these shapes? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. You can see I've got the unwraps on all these pieces individually already. And what it is pretty square. In fact, rectangular unwrap can work wonders here. This is where a place like a cube projection or an Smart UV pack will actually work, because it'll look for an angle and it will make a cut along any of those angles. Now all of these pieces are going to get packed together. You can see the way that they're all packed in with each other. In fact, I don't use the default Unity packer, as you can see the pack in here is not going to be nearly as good. Oh, it just said I'm doing the exact same thing. Well, it probably determined it wasn't good. I use a thing here called UV Pack Master, which I love, because this does an automatic algorithmic packing. This is a paid plugin. If you hate packing things by hand or optimizing them, get this. It's great. What it does, and in fact, I'll show you on this jacket, because I bet you I can get this jacket with the Pack Master to be like even better. So let's take all these elements, put them together, let's isolate them by themselves. And then if I do my Pack Master here, it's only going to do it on the stuff I selected. Let's just select everything, and I'm going to unpin just to clear it. Got tiles, I got groups, packing box, island rotation. There's ways I can pack it and then like duplicate the other half over later. Just probably okay. But you can see what I can do with this is, let's just take it and just see what the packing does. And it'll just keep running it until it creates the most efficient, and it'll tell me what my current area is. So 1 is perfect, which you'll never get. This is at 0.685 is saying, okay, it's about 60% efficient. If I'm done, I can be done with it. But to see what looks to happens if I take something like this and just straighten it. Let's see how my pack looks different now. Look at that, it already went up by a lot more. This is one of the reasons that you should consider straightening clothing items. Because the more you do it, let's see, well, let me straighten this without screwing it up too much. Sometimes without, he doesn't like to straighten this one because it's too weird. But what I could do with this is the other method of straightening here called straighten to edge, like that. And you can see it does like almost the same thing. But let's take now that and do the straighten here. The other ones came through pretty straight already, so I don't need to redo those. So we take all of these and now run back to the pack, and look at how much more efficient that's going to be, almost at a 0.8. So without even like doubling up the edges, I'm getting like pretty much the same that I was getting on either side there. So again, convenience, I like it. But I was talking about guns, specifically unwrapping this. So you can see the unwrap now on something like this is like, where are my edges? Let's take all of these. And I left this in the project so you can just kind of inspect it and see how. Let's unwrap it, seams from islands. So you're gonna see it, something like this. Hey, I got a cylinder and I unwrapped it in 4 places. Let's switch it to this mode so it's a little bit clearer. I also need auto smooth. They call it shade smooth by angle, by the way, if your stuff updates, because auto smooth is now a property in here, which is I kind of like it better, but a lot of people are hating on it. Well, so whatever. Turn that wireframe off, and you can see, hey, here's where I have those edges. I can leave these nice and flat, and I can put all these together. Let's take another look at something else though about the jacket really quick. Yeah, just showing you, hey, everything's a nice cylinder unwrap. Where do I put the edges? Where do I put the seams on something like this? I put the seams here. I don't really need a seam here. I think that's an accident, so I can just clear that. Clear seam. But I do need all of these other ones. And I've just taken the whole thing and unwrapped it like this. And I could take this whole bit and go to my Texel density, my UV pack master, no, my UV2, so, and then go into straighten UVs. I have this little inside hole. I've made a cut there, I've made a cut there, and then everywhere else I need to make a little cut so that I can unwrap it more clearly. So this is how you kind of look at hard surface unwrapping, and it's like a very simple way of looking at it. So this is, I left this in here as a little demo prop so that if you have questions or you're stuck on like how would I unwrap X or Y, take a look at how I did it. A cylinder with a little bevel, you just choose, does the bevel part go on these edges or does it go on the top and the bottom? It's your call. Let's go back to this and see if there's any other areas that, oh yeah, so here's another thing that you're going to consider that I'm going to show in the demo. I will be unwrapping these as groupings, and one of the ways I can do that is take this coat, let's do our UV unwrap, we're going to go to shading, because we're going to make a duplicate of this instead, and so this is just going to be called coat. This is important because when we're inside of Painter, it's going to create layers based on what these materials are named. So let's take this coat and make sure that I can tell the difference between what's part of the coat UV and what's part of the head UV. The easiest way I know of doing that is by throwing a mapping on there. I'm of course using the add-on Node Wrangler, which you no doubt, if you've taken any of my classes, know I use a lot. It's an add-on to turn on Node Wrangler, and it lets you hit Control T to pull this up. And then I run this through a color mix node. I'll put that into B, and I'll set the mode from mix to multiply. So I can set this coat to like a color and then decide how strong that grid is. So I can still see the UV grid, but then let's take all of these and then this, Control L and link materials. And now everything that uses the coat material is going to do this. How about the head though? Let's take that head, let's give it the coat material and duplicate that and call it head, body, features, whatever. And so now everything that's on here is going to get like this color. And I can add anything else, like I usually add this texture to it. I think in my version, I took the hat. Let's do coat, head, duplicate it, call this hat, and I put the carrot and the hat on one together. So this brim, the brim, the carrot, and the hat. Control L, link materials. The eyes are going to get their entirely own, and I'll show you in a second how I like to unwrap the eyes. I'm going to do all of this in the tutorial video, so that's kind of pointless, I guess. I didn't need to duplicate it up. I took coat, and I want to duplicate that. Eyes. Again, just give it a different color so it's easy to tell. Let's take this and give it this body material. And then everything else is going to get this. So another thing I can do is I can select objects that are also attached to this material. So I can do Shift G, is it select grouped? No, is it Shift L? Select link, yeah. Everything that's got the same material, I'm selecting together. So I can just H to hide that. Material, hide that. Shift L, material, hide all these. So now I have all these items. That's all that's left. And on you, I'm going to take eyes, and instead of having this material, let's do this, duplicate it, call this body. I don't even know what color I have left, so. And then Control L, link materials. Alt H, bring everything back. And now I have these distinct separate pieces that I'll be able to tell which in the groups. And now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different texture sets that I'm going to try to pack together. So, you know, everything else is just, let's do the, you know, everything else is just the process of bringing these in together. The whole panel with the UV editor. Okay, so Liam, that is in this top panel. You see layout, modeling, sculpting, UV editing is this panel. I can change the mode from, say, this vision to this one. I know you're not coming in it with the most Blender experience. If you want to do all the same kind of approaches and stuff inside of Maya, because you know how to unwrap in Maya better, totally great. All of this stuff applies. Just we use Blender in here, so I know you don't come in with all the Blender experience. You just got to make sure, if you totally see any textures, you got to be on this one. This will just show the temporary attribute textures, which works fine for unwrapping. This will show me the breakdown. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to the very end step of the process, and I'm going to open up, don't save, one that I did yesterday. Just going through the whole process. And so here I have everything unwrapped. You can see if I took all of these items into my UV editing and unwrap them, it would make like no sense because they all sit on top of each other. And I also did have like a real problem with this coat. The new Baker in Substance. I used an old hack in Substance when I first made this that let me do it. MI247, Liam. That's my Blender class. That's sort of my intro class, which usually helps give you the foundations, all that. Yeah. So I do have a couple differences in here where the hat, I kind of cut out the center, I broke it in a couple pieces, I tried to lay it out. But basically, I've got this broken down to hat, coat, all of that. And then what I've done that's critical on my high poly is I've also given it unnamed but temporary materials. And what I've done is given everything a material with a different color based on what it's made out of. So I know that the fabric for the hat and the fabric for the pants are different, and the fabric for the coat is different, but these are all going to be like the rabbit fur. I know that this is going to be the nose. If I wanted to go further, I could even paint separate materials for something like the ears, or do some vertex painting, which is another technique. But you can see every different thing. It doesn't matter what color it is. Sometimes people call this a color ID map. Sometimes people call it a clown map because everything looks so ridiculous. But what matters is every one of these has a distinct material by itself. So what I can do is go to this high mode, and again, critically, this is absolutely critical. The A, sit immediately on top of each other. It will not work if they do not sit on top of each other. And B, they also have a naming scheme that is parallel with each other. If I have belt buckle underscore low, I have belt buckle underscore high. This is gonna mean that the computer is gonna know what is the high poly and the low poly version. So when it bakes it, it separates them and bakes them one at a time so they don't interrupt each other. Otherwise you get real problems. I talk more in the video about like the theory of baking and why it creates so many issues. Let's see if I can maybe fix this a little bit. Get them to line up a little bit more with each other. Because I got some bake issues in here that I'm not too thrilled with. That hopefully I'll be able to get around because they're close enough. So I've got these together. So I'm going to take the high poly. Again, they're sitting on top of each other. They're named exactly the same. I'm going to right click this and say select objects. So this is selecting all of my high poly objects. They're all 0, 0, 0, rotation and scaled, all zeroed out. And I'm going to go to File, Export, and I'm going to export them as an FBX with selected object. The other stuff I don't really care about, as long as I keep it consistent, because it's not about exporting to a game engine right now. I'm exporting it into Painter, and as long as it works in Painter and they both line up, that's fine. I export one to high. Then I select the other one, select objects, same deal, and I export that to low. You'll see the high one is 5.6 megabytes. The low one is 783 kilobytes, much, much smaller. Then that brings me into Painter, which is opening on the wrong monitor. Like, okay, I've had enough of dealing with monitors and Windows today, so I'm just gonna move it. It's gonna be fine. I'm not even gonna change it. Oh, now it opens here. Windows. Okay, so this has now given me an Adobe Painter, which is where we're gonna start really getting into our texturing. We're gonna do a new file. We're gonna select our project, and what I recommend, let's go here, you gotta bring in the low poly, is what it thinks is the file. The high poly is just a reference it's gonna use to bring in details. And document resolution, I recommend as high as you can go. I'm gonna set it to 496, but 2048 is probably fine. I wouldn't go much lower than that. But you'll see, this is basically how high we're going. We can actually all change it. I'm using 2022, I think, of Substance Painter. It's the one I used, it's the one I bought on Steam a couple years ago. You'll probably be using a newer version with better features than I have. But you have to sign up for the, I mean, you could do a trial. We're not using it that long in the class. I like having the Steam version, but you can go with the, there is an educational version that's available to you. Yeah, it's got the newer Baker, so the new Baker, yeah, which is fine. Actually, Marmoset's actually the best way to bake, but that's like a $300 one-time purchase, or like $50 or something for like a couple months. I don't usually do that. This is fine for what we're doing. Leave it as this template. Untick all these things. We don't want import cameras. We don't want auto unwrap. We don't want any of that. So we just bring it in. And this is going to be the file as we get it. And it looks fine. You know, and the cool thing about this is we can start putting materials and painting things on here. Yes, you do need to do this. We will be using this for baking and texturing, Liam. Yeah, Marmoset is better. This is better than it was, but it's not as good as Marmoset. And Liam, we will be using this for texturing. This is like, Painter is the texturing tool. It's the Photoshop of texturing. There's alternatives, but none of them are nearly as good as Painter. None of them are easy to use. Mari is a mess, and it's way more complicated. Every other open source tool doesn't even hold a candle to what you can do in this. Quixel Painter doesn't even have pressure sensitivity for pens, which is really an issue. Still doesn't. They just haven't updated Quixel Mixer in a long time. So now that I've got this, what I want to do is, you can see I've got my body, my coat, and my eye, and it keeps the exact same names as my materials, which is, again, why we break them off and name the materials, because it keeps them easily separatable from each other, but they represent, those materials represent different sets. Yeah, 3D coat's cool. I think it's neat. It's definitely better. Like, people prefer it for hand painted texturing, but it's definitely not as good for the whole PBR workflow. Yeah, absolutely better for stylized. I agree with that. And if you want to use 3D coat for this class, yeah, go ahead. I can stop you. So I'm going to go to my bake mesh maps in my texture set tab, because I don't have any of them yet. And I'm going to start, you can see I got body, coat, all that. I don't need to bake eye. Very critically, I don't. And one of the things that I will do with all of this is I turn off everything but normal in the bake. Because I don't want to, the other types of map baking are more time consuming, and I want to troubleshoot my problems first. And I'm going to set my common settings in here to, like, how big do I want to bake. I start with 1024. It's the simplest, most straightforward way. But now I bring in my high poly mesh right in here, which is high. It's giving me an idea of how they overlap and where they don't. There are some issues, of course, with where my solidify thing works. I think I need to fix that a little bit in this model. I probably should just apply the solidify and thicken it, but I don't worry that much about it. There are other things in here that they warn you about in terms of, like, hey, if it's got a UV seam on a hard edge, it doesn't like that everywhere. It basically did solidify, but I don't worry too much about that. We can turn these baking visualizations off, for now at least. So what I can do now is, you can see matching by name is off. So we need to change match from always, basically saying these will always match with each other, to by mesh name. And you can see right off the bat, hey, it's got all these meshes with no matches. That's because it's asking for their default of HIGH, and I just did high. So if I just set this, it goes, hey, look at all this matching now. Eyes high, eyes low. But eyes don't need to be baked. I don't have any detail in the eyes. They're more than enough here. I'm just going to paint them in here, so I click eyes off. So normal is on for all of these, and that's it. And let's go ahead and try baking. And you can see what it does now is it's come through and brought in all of the details. Oh, you know what happened? That's what happened with the coat. It didn't bring in the back of the coat. Interesting. Well, that's a perfect way for me to segue into fixing this kind of thing. Actually, it's probably better that I don't have the back of the coat because it'll totally throw off my bake. So it's actually ideal that I didn't export with the back of the coat. It'll be applied when we get to it later. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So now that I've got a bake, if I didn't like where it was, you can see with the visualization, we have frontal distance and rear distance. And if you have red, it means that you're going to get, let's bake it really quick. You're going to get these weird clipped things. You see all that? That's because it's clipping through the shape. And that's absolutely what we don't want. Some areas it looks better, so sometimes we might bake one of these at a time, like just the hat, and get it closer. If we can get it closer, that's better. So the hat's totally fine here, so we could probably bake the hat at these settings. But I'm gonna kind of do this all at once, but just enough. I'll have a little bit of red, but it's not gonna be so bad. Let's bake these textures, and we just make sure if we got a good normal bake, then the other bakes will go through. Okay, and now I want to show you, let's turn them all back on. So go to body, and let's turn on pretty much everything, but I don't need thickness, height, bent, normal, or opacity. Coat, same thing. We can turn on everything but thickness, height, bent, normal, and opacity. The last four, basically, for all of these. I'm using Alt-click to, like, get all of them on and then all of them off. And then head, same thing. I Alt-click and then Alt-click again. Thickness is used for some stuff, as is height and bent normal, but we're not using them in this class. It's just extra stuff to bake. And now I'm going to set my common settings. Let's go up. And I'm going to say, even though I'm working at 2048, I'm baking at 4096, because baking higher and working lower always looks better. So we're going to sit here, and we're going to bake selected texture, and now we wait. It's going to take a while, because it's going to go through and it's going to bake multiple maps, including our color ID map, which you're going to see like those big chunky colors come through every once in a while. And it's going to bake ambient occlusion, which is fake lighting. It's going to bake curvature and a position map, which is like where it is in world space. There you go. You just saw those like kind of clowny colors. So it's baking ambient occlusion, which is like the built-in shadows. Curvature is where it shows concave and convex, like where it's tight in together and tight out, which just lets you build in like lots of cool shadows. So, you know, it's going to go through, do the whole process, but we're going to see how different it's going to look when it's all done. Almost though. There's my color map coming through. And why the color map is so good. All right, and we're done. Let's go to painting mode and take a look at how different this character looks. Now, just to give you an idea of, you know, you can't remember that, but you see all the detail that I have that was on my high poly is now on my low poly, but it's still my low poly model, but it has a lot of the reflections and details as if it was a higher resolution model. This is the whole reason we do a normal map. Because if I take something like, say, my body here, or let's do my head, and you can see if I remove some of these maps in here, that's what it looks like by default. And that's what it looks like when it's all baked in, and how much better it's going to make our model look. And the reason we did all that color map stuff too now is if I want to take something, say, like on this, the body, and I want to change like the tie. Well, normally I have to do a bunch of masking and stuff like that, which we'll still have to do. Let's go find ourselves a little fabric pattern. Let's do this little, maybe we do this fabric suit. We'll make his pants out of that. So this is going to want to apply it to the whole body, which I obviously don't want. Let's change up the tiling on this, and how could we apply it to just maybe just the legs and even maybe just the tie? Maybe we do both. How do we do that? Well, we take this and we right click it, we do a black mask, which now says, hey, everywhere that's black, don't show it, everywhere there's white, do show it. We could just if we painted on that mask, you'd see we could paint where it goes, but we've got something much better than that. By right-clicking and saying add a color selection, we can choose that color map that we already got. And it's so much faster to do, let's do fabric knit now. Maybe I'm gonna do a knit tie for him, because that'll look pretty cool. So same thing, we do a black mask. We're gonna do a color selector. I'm gonna pick the tie material. And now when I change the properties here, to get his tie looking a little bit better. Like how much quicker that's gonna be. Same thing, let's go. Fabric, bamboo, leather, oops. Don't wanna be clicking all those. Kinda like that one. I'll do that one for the shirt. Let's do fabric soft for the shirt. Just drag it in. No, I don't like that. Let's do fabric rough. How about fabric basic for the shirt? Yeah, that'll work. Same deal. Add a black mask. Add a color selection. Pick out this. And now here I am, choosing the color of my shirt. Maybe he's got a nice yellow shirt. Very period appropriate. And then I'm choosing all the little settings about how much I want that thing to tile. And you can see, like, this is the cool part about, like, where we're going to get into texturing when we just apply the base stuff, is, like, how quickly I can take, after I've got the unwrap good, and after I've got all the pieces, and by the way, if my unwrap doesn't work, sometimes it's all about going back and forth. In fact, one of the things you'll see, I want to mention here, in the baking setting, is if you don't like something in the bake, we can always go to edit and re-import mesh and change it. So if I don't like how like my coat looks, I can just go back into here, make a change to the UVs or the position or get something to line up a little bit better, or just say, you know what, I probably don't actually want my solidify modifier to go out. So we can just, you know, maybe that's affecting the bake for it, so we can just come back, export as low, make sure we do selected objects. Just want to make sure I got the that error message, make sure I got the right thing. Set it to low, selected objects, okay. And then, yes, you can. It's all about double, well, I'll show you in a second. Let me just do this really quick. I'm gonna re-import this mesh. So now I don't even have the edges on it, and now I just want to rebake the coat by itself. And I can now change the settings and parameters of the coat if it's going to give me a better bake. So I don't have to rebake the whole thing, but it's going to give me these individual things. I am using now 5 different texture maps for this head, but another thing, ooh, yeah, that's another thing I want to show you, is we definitely don't need all of these to be at this super high resolution. In fact, in our different texture features, we can bake them differently by setting them in this menu. I'll show you right here as soon as this is done. Because like maybe these are all set to 2048, but my eye and my hat, like my eye is much smaller. That could probably be 512. My hat can be probably 1024. When I say these numbers, it used to be in older games that you would do one map basically for the whole character. There's actually multiple maps, but it would kind of all fit into one map. But nowadays it's very common to have 4, maybe 5, I think. You know, like on Spider-Man is a good example. They say on average they're like 8 to 12 different map sets, which have their whole baked in thing. But anyways, you see here, if I say, hey, my eye, I make my eye 512, I can make my hat 1024, and now that's the working resolution that they're going to work with. So let's return back to painting mode. And so you can see these are the resolutions we're going to work for. And maybe this bakes my coat a little bit better, or I can get more settings. But I can also change my coat in my materials. I've got this main shader, and I have different methods, but one of these is a double-sided one. Or is it just a tick in here? I want to see if I can change it. That normal parallax coat enabled sheen. Anisotropy tessellation does not have double-sided in here. Where do I actually change that? Ugh. It is not in here anymore. It's probably moved to some other menu to make an object appear double-sided, to make everyone's life easier. If I do new shader instance, and I make a new shader, won't let me do it from there. How about these properties? This is shader copy, and if I do something like the cutout here, like PBR Metal Rough, it'll show it on both sides. So this one's got this instance, and I'm using cutout alpha, which means it'll show it on both sides of the character, which is, you know, pretty convenient for this kind of texturing work. So I can get a double-sided look, but it's still painting the same on the inside and outside. It's just faking it for me. Let's see, we got a couple minutes left. Other questions, things that people want to see. This is where we want to get. We want to get to the point where we have our unwraps, they line up with our high poly, and we can do a bake. And it's going to take some troubleshooting, but don't forget, semester's almost over, and we've got you know, a lot more work to do to get this through. And so we're going to have to do some cleanup, and often this is iterative to go back and forth and fix things that are broken. I like texture painting in this program a lot. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of great tools, but especially when you get to this stage, to me, this is like victory lap stage. Like, you've already done all the stuff. Are eyes separate files? Absolutely. Texel density equal across the character. Texture files, yes, they're absolutely different, separate files. And to answer your question about how to keep texel density even across the character, critically, what I'm actually doing is I'm keeping texel density even across every one of these little sections, and then I'm giving them different kind of texel space based on what they needed. So like, say this hat and carrot, all this stuff here is obviously different than this. I try to control that as best I can by smartly grouping things. So this is a smaller group, so I'm giving it a smaller texture size. Instead of 2048, I'm giving this 1024. This I'm getting 2048, the coat I'm giving 2048, and the body I'm giving 2048, and the eyes I'm giving 512. So you can see the eyes are showing a much higher texel density, but we won't have that in Painter because I'm setting the eyes to be 512 and I'm setting the hat to be 1024. Let's do these eyes, you know, really quick. So the eyes are going to be their own little layer, and one of the things I did do, I forgot to mention that with the eyes. The way I unwrap the eyes is they do overlap with each other, and I did a mirror modifier to like make that happen so that there is only one side and it mirrors perfectly, and I just unwrapped it and stretched it out so it's more circular, because again, most of our files are going to be rectangular. So in here, what that means is I can texture the eye. In fact, let's just get everything here, and I don't need any of these. Instead, I'm going to go and do a new base layer. I almost never use paint layers for stuff. I use base layers for almost everything. Call that base, and this gives me my uniform roughness, which should be pretty shiny. Eyes are very shiny. A uniform base color, which is, I'm going to just start with like a flat white. No metallic, no normal, none of the other stuff, but it's a nice even color. And now, if I want some like pupils for the eyeball, I can do something like a new fill layer, and I can choose, let's just start with just red as a base color, add a black mask, and then this is where I would either add like a fill or a generator, but generators are pretty interesting because I can do it based on the UVs. So like, we got this little guy here, curvature, all of that. Auto stitcher is pretty interesting, but you can see I can change it by like the space that it's in. I wonder UV texel, what that's going to do for me. No, that's texel density. It's not going to help me. I'm looking to see if it'll give me like an edge or a curvature thing. Doesn't have a curvature. I didn't bake a curvature map. That's why it's not going to work. That's fine though. I'm just going to take this then. I'm just going to make it easy on myself. I'm going to do a little paint. And so what I can do, let's bring this back, everything else back for the eye really quick. And I'll hide the hat. Again, why it's really nice to break these up. It makes it a lot easier. And now I can paint where I want the eyes to be, and kind of the shape that I want them to be. And then I can take my fill, because I don't worry about the brush settings at all. So with this fill, now I can do a levels node. This is getting a little ahead to texturing, and this lets me we kind of crunch or clamp the values however I want. And what's cool about this too is because I have this just in here, I can just set this to a color, and I'm gonna click this so it doesn't do any height or roughness information. And now I have an eye that I can change as much as I want. But what's cool is because I have this paint levels, check it out. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna add an anchor. This is gonna sort of store this information. I'm gonna call this eye mask. So it remembers caps lock. I'm always putting caps lock on. Eye mask. So I'm putting the eye mask in there. And now if I do another layer with another black mask, and I'm gonna do a selection, not color selection, which one is it? It's fill. I gotta do it by fill. Because I can fill, instead of a uniform, I can fill an anchor point, which is eye mask. So it's the same one. And now I can add its own levels node. And now I'm controlling levels again. But I can like crunch it back this way, or let's get rid of levels really quick because the other one I can use. Let's like, I like to set it, whenever I'm testing something, I set it to red because it's more obvious. I want to get this like more controlled, like crunch. So instead, I'm going to do a fill. I'm going to do a blur because it's just going to like smooth everything out. Doesn't seem to be blurring it though. Oh, there we go. And then I can add a filter, and we can do something like, I'm doing the other ones, but I can also do like a clamp. Clamp's not doing what I expected it to do. Let's try, I mean, range and scan work. Oh, shift, I don't want shift, I want histogram, scan. There we go. Beautiful. So now I can control its position and its contrast. And so if we turn this back on, you can see now, contrast, position, and then let's just duplicate that layer. And this time I'm going to make this the black inner part of the eye. And all I got to do here is just change my histogram, shift in, blur out the contrast. He looks like he's seen some stuff. Let's set this up higher, blur it a lot more. Or I might have to soften the original. I might just do a different fill or just paint it by hand. Yep, stream is unlisted. That's the point. This is just for a class, but glad I can give you some tips. So I cut this, and instead, let's do that. I'm gonna do a paint. Put it first. Make my brush size a little smaller. I guess I don't need blur if I'm gonna do that. He looks so spooked. Let's erase that. Paint it back on. Yeah, that seems like what I'm going to want to do. You can even do a little faked eye glow. And if I just want to do it with a brush layer, because I'm feeling lazy, which I am right now, all I have to do is come in here, only paint color, just choose. And what you'll see when I do this, there we go, is it's mirrored on the other side. You too, take it easy. Yeah, this class I forgot to put in here, unlisted, like I usually do. But maybe I should just be a YouTuber. 5 minutes. Questions. Things you want to know about. Stuff you need help with. Things you want to see me do on this rabbit. I don't know. If there's no questions, I'll just cut it and we can go home today. And I get to see everybody, but like, here's the big thing. As I showed you, like, I didn't do... What do you mean merging the model, Liam? What does that mean? Maybe break that down for me. I know there's like a delay in this because we're not on a voice call, we're on a stream. I should do the super low latency one, is what I should do. Is a good idea. I'm waiting to see if I can figure out what Liam means. But I'd actually be faster if I just typed it. What do you mean by merging the model? Have the high poly we take from ZBrush and separate it. Yeah, basically you want to, for every piece, you want to break it in. So say that you've modeled your whole mesh and it's all one contiguous piece, then the high polys you combine together to be the same number of pieces. Essentially, you can do like a Control J inside of Blender to join up any number of things that you want. So if it's one element all together in your low poly, you want to combine those high poly objects together. If they're separate, you want to make them separate, so that you want the same number of high poly and the same number of low poly objects, so you can have an underscore low and an underscore high for all of them. Now in this case, I have a high for the eye, and I don't need it because I'm not actually baking anything for the eye. So I don't actually need a high poly for the eye. I just happen to have one because it's easier. It was just easy enough to have. But if I was not going to have any baked normal onto something, then I wouldn't need it. But everything's mostly going to have a baked normal. If there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day here. Thanks everyone for this. I'm going to do a lot of the same stuff with the demo. Try to re-record, take this afternoon to re-record the video. Because like I said, I did a 90-minute version. I just didn't like it. I thought it was too meandering and I took too much time. And I think I could improve it a lot. So I'm going to do that. But other than that, like if you're, I feel like a lot of these retopologies still have a lot of ways to go. So I don't want people falling behind. Our goal is to get a good unwrap and a good bake. As long as we have those things, we're in pretty good shape, because then we can texture them, then we can pose them, and then we're done. We're almost finished with this class. We're so close. I can't wait. Anyway, everybody, have a good week. Have a good weekend. I'll see everybody on Monday.